On March 18th, 2020, the Chicago Tribune reported that the state of Illinois would allow cannabis dispensaries to take orders from medical patients outside of their shops, at the curb, or in the parking lot to reduce the spread of coronavirus. Originally, the state's Department of Financial and Professional Regulation issued guidance to dispensaries on how to help contain COVID-19, a disease caused by a new coronavirus. The original guidance only lasted until March 30th, 2020. Through time, the guidance has been extended. Today, it was brought to my attention that the same regulatory body that had issued the temporary order had announced the order would expire. The special effort was made to protect medical cannabis patients, many of whom have compromised immune systems but still needed to access medical cannabis. The effort protected more than those who had compromised immune systems. The effort quickly became a game changer for many patients, including those who have mobility impairments, physical disabilities, parents of pediatric patients who cannot enter the dispensary, for example, patients with small children who may need to get their medicine but may not be able to access or afford childcare. While thoughts and opinions may have changed about the coronavirus, the reality that we live in has not. Patients that were immunocompromised before and during the pandemic will continue to be immunocompromised. Unfortunately, I can almost guarantee you that our patients that have been faced with mobility impairments or physical disabilities may still continue to face those challenges. And lastly, the parents that we mentioned, childcare may still not be an option. All of the hypotheticals that I've discussed so far are out of our hands. The one thing that we do have control over today is this guidance. We've extended it many times in the past. I believe we can and should extend it again. In conclusion, before I introduce my guests for today's show, the temporary guidance allowing cannabis dispensaries to take orders from medical patients outside of their shops is a vital measure that helps to protect vulnerable populations, including but not limited to those with compromised immune systems, mobility impairments, and physical disabilities, as well as parents of pediatric patients and patients with small children. Given the ongoing challenges posed by COVID-19 and the ongoing needs of these patients, it is imperative that this guidance be extended and continued. And on that note, I want to introduce my guests today. Edie Moore, Felicia Santiago, Joseph Friedman, and Katie Sullivan. Everybody, say hi.
Hey.
Hello. Hey. Glad to be here.
And
thanks, Cole.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you all. Katie, since you kind of rounded us all you rounded us up today. I can't speak. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then maybe we'll segue to our friends at Chicago Normal.
Cool. So, hey everybody, I'm Katie Sullivan. I'm a family nurse practitioner and cannabis clinician. So I specialize in working with medical cannabis patients. I own Modern Compassionate Care, practice on the Northwest Side. I'm also a member of Chicago Normal, a member of the Illinois Cannabis Equity Coalition, and recently was appointed to the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board for the state. So that's kind of my background.
Well, I'm Felicia Santiago.
You outranked me now.
Deputy Director for Chicago Normal. My professional background is in healthcare management. Working on, I work with medical insurance. So that's where my passion meets cannabis there. So my goal for being a part of the mission is to have these discussions and figure out how the healthcare system and cannabis can one day marry. So I know a lot of that work comes from legislative work. So that's why I'm with Chicago Normal.
And I'm Edie Moore. I'm the former executive director, but now I'm the legislative director of Chicago Normal. I am a medical cannabis patient. I used to be one for a caregiver for my mom. When we started in this down this journey, there was only medical cannabis, and I am of the mind that medical cannabis first. We should always be centering the patients and that seems to have been getting lost, and we need to be stepping up and saying something about it. So that's why I'm here today. Thanks for inviting us.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Joseph Friedman. I'm a pharmacist. I've got a master's in business. I owned and operated a medical cannabis dispensary in Buffalo Grove. It was probably the most professional dispensary in the state of Illinois. We had healthcare professionals on staff full-time from day one. We also established relationships with two colleges of pharmacy, Chicago State University College of Pharmacy and Roosevelt University College of Pharmacy, to have fourth-year pharmacy students for the first time in the nation doing a clinical rotation in a medical cannabis dispensary. I'm on the scientific advisory board of Cannability, a cooperative that's a new startup. I am the advisory board of Cannabis RX magazine. I've written several articles and I spearhead their podcast. I've also done quite a few podcasts with the Pharmacy Podcast Network on cannabis, and I continue to do that.
Awesome.
All right. Well, folks, listeners and people that are tuning in, if you want to check out everything from Katie, Joseph, Edie, and Felicia, just look in the podcast description and we'll have links to Chicago Normal, all that good stuff. So where do we want to start today? I want to say again, thank you all for your time. I feel like this cause is important to me, as you may have been able to pick up from my monologue.
I'd say let's start with Katie. She brought us all together today, rounded us up.
Yeah.
Okay, totally. So thank you. And, again, you guys know how much I appreciate you. So yesterday I was making my visit to the dispensary to pick up my medicine, and I was handed a notice that curbside pickup was ending for medical patients all throughout Illinois. And, even when I was speaking to it at the dispensary staff, they were sort of like, yeah, we're not for this at all. But we have no control over it. We have to tell you guys this now. So I was like, what? And I got home and I thought, how could this be happening? Like, I didn't hear anything about it. I was going back to look to see, like, did I get a notice from the state about this? Anything? No. And I finally woke up at 4 a.m. this morning, still thinking about it. And first decided to post something on Instagram. And then I'm like, you know what? I have a big network. We have a big network here in Chicago of activists, advocates, practitioners. If not this issue, then we need to do something now. So I just emailed all of you guys, and I was totally touched by, Cole, I think you're the first one to respond, and just completely yes, we need to bring attention to this. Edie and Felicia, Joe, you guys just jumped right in with your suggestions. And, the response from patients online, people I've talked to, has been pretty shocked, disappointed, and kind of upset that they weren't told about this by the state. So this is an issue that, so many of my patients are helped by this. I work specifically with a lot of pediatric patients, so they have caregivers who have to go and pick up the cannabis. The curbside has been a big help for them, for older adults, of my little old ladies who are so relieved to not have to cross an icy parking lot in the winter. And it's January 1st, we're taking away curbside. So, I had a bee in my bonnet. I was kind of mad at first. And then I thought, okay, let's see what's going on here. And you guys responded amazingly. I really just appreciated everyone saying, hey, yeah, we're down. We definitely want to step up to this. And I'm so grateful that you've given us a platform to talk about it too, Cole. Because I think, most medical patients, if you haven't come to the dispensary this week, you're probably not aware that this is happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason I wanted to jump on this, Katie, you made a really good point, and I believe our friends from Chicago Normal tagged on. This is guidance. And if this thing goes, you can add this to the list of other things that we have issues with regard to Illinois cannabis, so we got to act now.
Felicia and I were really shocked too. We heard about it from our good friend Kaylee Hookirk, who also has a lot of contacts with the patient population. And we were outraged, and we're like, wait, we just had a meeting with the state last week on Tuesday, right? Mm-hmm. And we typically don't talk about medical cannabis in that particular meeting, but we did that day. Mm-hmm. And nothing came up. Nothing new, nothing. It's here's another reason. Let's add, like you said, Cole, just add it to the list. And in the middle of winter, it's January. Why would you do that in January?
Yeah.
We talk about limiting access and taking away, I don't know if we could call it a right per se, you know, legally a right, but it's definitely a privilege. And we feel like the state doesn't have any problems, you know,
Yeah.
giving others privileges and letting them keep theirs.
Yeah. And Katie, I think it was this week or last week that just passed, we had a meeting with the medical working group. And I don't recall that being brought up in that meeting either. And that's usually where we get updates on what's happening.
Yeah.
And that was not mentioned at all. Because it definitely would have, if they would have mentioned in that meeting, I know because patients come to that meeting, there would have been a major concern right then and there. And so for us not to know just last week when we just met with y'all before the holidays, you're gonna say nothing, you know, like it's kind of like, what's going on? Like, why?
And where's the lack of transparency? This is something that we did bring up at our meeting. Why are things happening in the dark and then they just plop out on us? But, you know, this probably should have been codified into law since we knew it was so beneficial to the patient population. And so that's just one of the things that we can work on. We did hear that there is a bill. I'm still trying to get my hands on it. And just, you know, read it over and make sure it says what we think it should say and not anything more or anything less. But that's one of the things that I do at Chicago Normal is just try to pull together all these balloon strings that are going all over the place. And like you said, Katie, I don't know if you said it before we started, but one plant, one agency. If we were under one agency, this would not be, all these surprises wouldn't be happening. Left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing all the time. And it really affects people. It affects people, it affects businesses, it affects patients. It's crazy.
I've got a question.
Yeah, this is the perfect example of that. Sorry, Joe.
That's okay. I've got a question for the group. How much do we know that curbside, curbside service was being used on rec dispensaries? Because, you know, as more and more dispensaries are only rec, were, you know, people just driving up and saying, "Hey, bring my stuff out." I mean, do we have any idea if that was happening?
The variance.
Well, first of all, there aren't more and more dispensaries that are only rec. So there's only been 2 new dispensaries in the past year and a half
that have actually opened. Yeah,
that are actually open. So they can't use that as an excuse. And if those rec dispensaries were doing it, they shouldn't have been. They should have been fined. The patient shouldn't have been. This shouldn't affect the patients.
Well, really quick, I was going to say, I think that like Cresco and a few other stores have opened up +1 locations. Like I think Decatur or Danville, I always get them mixed up as an example where it's an adult use location. So, but to your, I think this is what you just said, Edie, at the end of your response. So correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but this was a medical only variance. So back to your question, Joseph, it didn't apply to adult use.
Okay. No, I wasn't.
And if they were doing it, why penalize the patients for that?
Okay. Well, you know, when I was running my dispensary, we didn't have curbside service yet. This was before COVID. And, but a couple of times, I had situations where they couldn't get out of their car or they had kids and they couldn't come in and, all those same things. And to the chagrin of my head of security, I would go out there, get their medical cannabis card, get their money, bring them out their products. And, a few times we did this because it was so necessary for a certain population. And it was thrilling to hear that there was curbside service because that's exactly the kind of service that a lot of these patients need.
Your dispensary just sounds, I always tell you, like the service that people were getting there. That's how all the medical dispensaries should be. It really, I wish that they would make you be the czar of the medical dispensaries and tell them how to do it right. But I think that, this service is important. Like, it started because of the pandemic, but it quickly was proven to be really popular with medical patients, really helpful for people who have these impairments, or even like PTSD patients, people that going into a busy store with a ton of people sometimes is hard. Sometimes it prevents them from actually getting their medicine because they don't want to deal with that. And then the idea that, you could just pull up, deal with one person in the, safety of your car, even for those patients, I think they utilize it quite a lot. And, like these are the people, this is who we need to be thinking about. And what's happened here, which we all know, is that since adult use legalization occurred in Illinois, the priorities of the medical patients have kind of been forgotten. Like, this was pitched to Illinois almost as like, okay, this is a money-making thing. And we see, profits over patients time and again now, where, I'm going to bring this up. We did mention, like Joe mentioned, we've never increased the number of dispensaries past 55 medical dispensaries. But at this point, what's the purpose? We have released all these licenses. Maybe some of these new dispensaries, maybe some of these social equity applicants who I know are patient-minded would like to provide service to patients, would give patients more option, would open accessibility. And let the patients decide where they want to go, and let them shop at any dispensary with their medical card that's offering things like curbside pickup, like, extra assistance, where they're going to go the extra mile, like, Joe's patients were able to get, because we know there's such a variety of people using cannabis, and it's growing more and more, and it's a good thing. And why, we want
no reason why the patient should not be able to go to any dispensary and get their patient rights price. I even had, as a patient, I went down to Springfield where I was lobbying and had to switch my dispensary down there just so I could shop down there. It was even, and I said, I forget it. I don't have time to fill out this form. But it was a 40% increase. I was like, you know what? I'll take the time. I'll fill out the form. But then when I get back home, they're like, oh, you're not in the system. I said, oh shit, that's right. I forgot. I switched. So then I would switch again. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
And now I should say they finally removed that provision.
Right.
So for medical patients, they removed that. You can now go to any medical dispensary. Good first step, because that's ridiculous. Exactly. You're traveling and you have to file paperwork for where you might be. Right. So now it's any medical, but like, okay, good first step. Now let's expand it. Medical patients need the most access. Yeah. Especially because of the product availability. It's like people are looking for specific products, and there's no consistency place to place.
Well, Katie, you're going to be on the.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Katie. You're going to be on the Illinois Medical Cannabis Advisory Board. I'm going to be on that board as well, and
that's right.
I think it's going to be up to you and I and the other board members to really push these patient rights, because I don't think we're just going to be there to listen to petitions about adding additional conditions. I think there's going to be more, because as we all know, patients are being left out with the change in this industry in Illinois. It happened in Nevada, where it was medical, it went rec, and patients are totally out the door. And it's happened in other states as well. And it's slowly happening in Illinois. And hopefully with the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board, the state is looking at, well, we really have to take care of the patients as well, because they're being left out.
Right. I'm so hoping you're right, that we can make some broader recommendations. I'd love to get Chicago NORML in to talk to the advisory board members about the issues that patients are facing. You guys have such a history of the work that you've done here. And there's a great group of people that are going to be on this board, but they could use some context, background, and history about, what's happened with all of the laws, in the past few years in Illinois. And you guys are really the experts. Like I would love that if we could, get them to come in and sit down a meeting with us. They haven't filled the whole board yet, and we haven't yet met. So that's, but I know I've already spoken to you guys about like wanting to bring the advocacy community right to this board, and like, let's take your input, because you know the issues. And, like anyone else, Nicole, I'm sure you have your ear to the ground on these issues all the time as well, and that people are reporting stuff to you constantly about what's going on here. So that's what the state needs to hear. I really do think there's people that are, working in the state, that are committed to patients, that want to change this. I work, I love working with the folks down at IDPH, Division of Medical Cannabis. They're really helpful to my patients. So, I think the heart is there. I think we just need to make our voices known. And we do have a coalition, and it's a great group of people. And we have so many different disciplines of people, backgrounds, specialties, knowledge of the law, the legislative process. It's really important because, we need everybody to make this happen, I think. And I'm really hopeful. Like, I'm hopeful that the advisory board is going to be an outlet for that as well.
Absolutely. I would say like a couple of things. As an organizer, it's good to have these conversations that we're having, right? To really identify the stakeholders and identify voices and identify the issues and stuff like that. So this is important, but what also is important is to actually put pen to paper and hands in dirt and start building things together. And so that's kind of my niche, is to organize, but also help organizers so that we actually put action behind those words. I also feel like this issue right here, I think I started preaching this last year, maybe the year before, when we were talking about our health fair that we do every year, is that this conversation, I kept saying, was going to come back. We're going to come back to this, and we need to start having these conversations. We need to start educating our healthcare providers. In healthcare administration that I'm in, if you are not credentialed, the legislators, lobbyists, decision makers don't want to hear it, in the medical field. So it's good that we have credentialed folks like Katie and Joseph saying these things, but we need your peers to be preaching this to our legislators, because that's going to make the difference here.
And their doctors.
And yes, absolutely. So we need more folks like this having this conversation, identifying the problems, so that folks like us who can actually start working on legislation, we have your backing behind us, because they're going to listen to folks like you, because you're in the medical field day in and day out with patients. And in the medical field, patient care is priority, because patients have rights. It also shows that our state does not prioritize medical patients, nor its medical program, nor its patients in the same way as they prioritize the healthcare industry. And that's wrong. You should have access to proper health care. And if you use cannabis for your health care, you should have access to it. So we also need to remember that Illinois made a lot of money in 2015, 16, and 17 off medical patients first. So you need to pay homage to them and also protect them, because that was the foundation of why we're all here today. So we have to talk about it. We also got to organize and be about it. And that's where conversations, constant education, and doing the legislative work all got to play hand in hand together, so we can make a difference.
Because a working group doesn't work if it's not working towards something.
Yeah.
We're just sitting around talking.
We're just sitting around talking about it. And they didn't even say, we were talking so much, they didn't even tell us this in the doggone medical working group.
Yeah. Well, hey, to your point, just on this specific issue, and I'd love to, I wanted to take advantage of having you all in this one place to talk about the, larger issues at hand. Maybe we can close that out. But maybe we'll edit this, and if we do, I'll replace it. But this is the most recent call to action. And so if folks are wondering, the best way they can maybe make their voice heard about this, would you agree that contacting IDFPR, the people that released this guidance, would probably be a great place to start? But also the office of the CROO, the Cannabis Regulation Oversight Officer. If you're watching the podcast right now, I'm displaying the contact information for both of these offices. And if you're listening, they'll be in the podcast description. So the call to action, I would say today, is contact IDFPR and CROO, and please share how this impacts you on social media. That's another way you can make sure that you're heard and that our patients are heard. Use hashtag Illinois Curbside, and we might try to collect all of your posts. So please share how this impacts you or your loved ones, or your friends. I know this impacts more more people than even we've got listed here. This is an including but not limited to list. So just wanted to get that call to action out there. Sorry for hijacking the conversation. I want to spin it out though to kind of these bigger topics we've been kicking around. Yeah, what are some thoughts we have percolating about the medical cannabis program?
It just needs to go further. It needs work, and no one's working on it. There hasn't been any legislation filed that we can find, or that has passed, certainly, to improve situations. And the same thing with adult. We have been working as the legislative director. We've been working with the Cannabis Equity Coalition and others constantly, but there's been no effort to tweak or change or improve, and this certainly erodes the programs.
For
Well,
sure.
I think, you guys at Chicago Normal, and this podcast, can possibly be sent to those email addresses that you mentioned, Cole, on that screen. And then I think what we can do is get our heads together and spend a day in Springfield and knock on some doors and have some meetings. If that's something that you feel it would be good, because it sounds like you're in Springfield a lot anyways, Edie, and so, you guys, so what do you think?
I mean, definitely for future, I plan to find myself in Springfield and would love to join you all. Please let me know how I can. My thing about this issue, it's so crazy that this literally is apparently done on January 1st unless somebody does something about it.
Right.
And I'm not trying to litmus test people, but I have contacted Bob Morgan, Kelly Cassidy, representatives who often are described as fighting on behalf of medical patients, and they say they're working on it. So, let's hope that works out. But I really think that public pressure would really, and I don't mean to say pressure, just voice your experience, voice how this impacts you.
Well, let's be clear though. So when
Sure.
we're choosing our target for a specific campaign or a specific action, you've got to choose the right people. So I know Bob Morgan and Kelly Cassidy are great people to reach out to typically. However, this didn't come from the legislature. That's where they work.
Yeah.
So we need to target people who work in the administration, in the departments. That's where this came from. So this is one of the things that we're going to be talking about in our lobbying workshop next month. I don't know where the information is for that. Sorry. Oh, it's on our IG page. But you've got to pick the targets strategically, because they'll say, "Well, I'm working on it." Well, they don't. They got to make a call, the same call that you would make.
Right.
Edie, you mentioned that you were a patient and you were also a caregiver for your mother.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you ever use curbside service?
This was a while ago. My mom passed in 2017.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. But yeah, this was a while ago. I've never used curbside service as a patient myself. I don't really have to. But I recognize I recognize the need for it.
Do we think it would be useful to have a patient who uses curbside service to sound off on one of these podcasts?
Absolutely.
Yeah, not a bad idea.
I mean, if you need a patient, I've got a lot. So
Katie's got all the patients.
Okay.
I mean, that would be willing to talk. Whenever I ask them, they're like, if you need me to speak about this, I'm like, yep, noted.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
that's really,
I was going to say, I haven't actually had an opportunity this afternoon to get into the Facebook group, the Medical Cannabis Facebook group, but I'm sure that they are really sounding off. So
yeah, I haven't looked on there either.
Yeah.
I also have a connection to Senator Laura Fine, if that could be of use.
Yeah, I need to get my hands on that. Supposedly there was a bill that was filed last year. It's been a weird day. The holiday, everyone's shutting down, and
I
We're
know, and
trying
I
to-
started that monster thing, but if I can get that, I'll forward it to you right away. The because that's what you want to be doing on New Year's Eve, reviewing some legislation. I know.
We get up, Cole, we get up every morning. It feels like we run right into a brick wall every day. Every day.
It makes it really hard to treat patients. Like just as from a provider's perspective, the issues with the state system, to like your point, what you were saying before, the availability and consistency of products, the fees can still go down. There's some fees that should be changed. You know, that we have the ability to do lifelong certifications for people now, which is awesome. That hasn't really been publicized too much. But one thing I hate about that is I see a lot of patients that are coming to renew their card, but they're just seeing me for the first time. So if I lifelong certify them, they still have to pay the normal fee for 3 years, and then their renewal fee drops to 50, even though they're a renewal patient. I know maybe I'm getting technical with some specific stuff, but like that issue in and of itself, where it's like, hey, lifelong patient, that's awesome. We're trying to save hassle. We're trying to save unnecessary fees and appointments for people, but we're missing this little piece of it. And it's little details like that.
Little paper card either. I don't like that.
Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that. I did hear a rumor they were bringing back, and I shouldn't like say that it was a literal rumor, but like that they were going to bring back the physical cards just because so many people had complained. But you know, I just really feel like, you know, we see every single month how much money the state's making with the adult use market. Why do we nickel and dime patients? You know, already they're paying some of the highest prices, even at the medical rate in the country. We don't have, you know, and I'm hoping that more competition as these new companies are able to get up and running. Hopefully that will bring prices down for patients, but there's a lot more we can do. And I mean, I can talk about
and
this
letting
for
those
5
patients
hours,
be able to go to the new dispensaries. That opens up a whole market for those new businesses, because right now as a patient you're not going to frequent one of those new dispensaries because you're going to pay 40% more. So that means the MSOs have a lot on patients.
They're entrenched, and that's who's benefiting from this system right now. It's set up to benefit the people that have the current medical licenses, not to benefit patients. So that needs to be rectified. You know, and I think it's pretty hard to argue against that. You know, like if our elected representatives have to face that, you know, of course I think that, but like, it just makes sense. Like all of what we're saying, and again, I'm biased, but it's simple, it's easy. There's a lot of simple things we could do to improve the program, like now. And number one is this curbside. Like,
well, IDFPR has developed a system of overregulation from the get-go. You know, early on when we first opened up PDI Medical, you know, we did have some, you know, seizure young patients, and their parents were caregivers. They would come in, but at the very beginning of this industry in Illinois, all we had was flour. But we had these easy butter makers, you know, for sale. And so what we would do is go talk to the patient. Okay, here, buy a gram of flour. Here's the way you go ahead and put it into this easy butter maker. You add so much, you know, we gave them instructions on how to get a dose for their kid. And, and, you know, and what's crazy is, you know, I'm a pharmacist and I used to work, you know, in pharmacy, and we used to see an inspector once every 2 years. We had an inspector in my dispensary 4 times in the first year, and overregulation. And they came in once and they said, well, we want to see all the, you know, did you sell any flour to a pediatric patient? And I would say, well, and then they could look in BioTrack and they can actually see the age to the patient. And all we have, and I explained to them, they said, well, no, you're not allowed to do that. And we were fined. And you know, it just was. And I would explain the reasoning behind it and what we did, and it wasn't good enough. So it's these regulations that are choking this industry. And fortunately, we found ways around that with more products coming out that we can actually dispense to someone under 18. But this is what we're dealing with right now, is overregulation.
Yeah, because the state doesn't consider medical cannabis medicine. If they considered it medicine, it would be treated as medicine. You drive up to the pharmacy to get your medication. You talk to a pharmacist when you have questions. It is not considered the same. That's the problem. We have to prove with data, testimony, all types of things to prove that medical cannabis should be treated just as that, as medicine, the same way your hydrocodone and all that other stuff is considered. That's why it's just not being treated the same. They don't even see it as the same thing.
Well, we have to have some meetings and convince the regulators that it is medicine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, just I'll show you, I'll put the report in the podcast description, folks. I'm sorry that I don't have it offhand. I've been doing a awesome research project into the history of Illinois cannabis. And one of the reports I found was, I think, Joseph, you'll like this one. And Katie, you might appreciate this too, being in healthcare. They did a comparison how pharmaceutical drugs are able to be transported in Illinois versus how cannabis is transported.
Right.
Pharmaceutical drugs, people that are pharmaceutical representatives, nothing against them, but what they're able to do is just they could literally just throw the bag of pills that they're transporting to a pharmacy in their front seat of their car, versus they showed the medical cannabis transport, which is it's inside of a van, but not only inside of a van, there's a locked enclosure inside of the van, double locked. GPS tracked.
That's welded to the bottom of the van.
Yep, GPS tracked. We're tracking it like it's a weapon moving around the state of Illinois. I'm just saying.
I mean, they can't get rid of criminalization. It's like it's always creeping in. That's the underlying tone of a lot of this stuff, that it's like, I really feel like that ethos needs to be gone. We can't criminalize patients, and it's ridiculous to the extent you can get booze delivered. You can buy it at Walgreens. I mean, come on. And we know that's not good for anybody. We know that's not. We know there's big problems with that.
How are patients supposed to get seeds again legally?
That's a huge, we all know that's a huge issue. Bingo. Thank you, Edie.
Add it to the list.
Add it to the list. Yeah.
Cole, I used to be a pharmaceutical sales rep, and I used to carry drugs in my trunk and on my front seat. And these were, Legend pharmaceuticals. You needed a prescription for it, but it wasn't the stuff that was abused. It wasn't, hydrocodone. We really didn't have those types of products with the company I was working for. And I highly doubt the reps that worked for companies that had those products were going around with samples. I don't know. Maybe Purdue Pharma reps were walking around with OxyContin. So that's sort of like one of the,
the specific report that I need people to check out, to your point, because I just smoked a joint. I could be wrong. The report that I'm going to put in the podcast description is a comparison between cannabis and opioids and how they're transported.
Cool.
I believe, if my memory is correct. So when it comes out, I'll send you guys the link if you're all curious. It's a short report from ABC. So
I would say that also, if you just made that comparison, like when you see money being transported by Brinks and all those other folks, they're same way. It's guarded, it's protected, same way as cannabis. Why? Because the value. If you can get away with throwing some hydrocodone pills in your car, that lets you know it's not that valuable, which is why cannabis has to be locked up like money, because it's valuable. And that's why we regular folks can't even get in, because it's valuable.
It's abused.
Which is why, again, they're not taking it as serious as it should be, because they just don't view it the same way as we do.
Or for us.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think that's a good, that people really do need to, and kind of to your point, what you were saying before, like getting patients involved. And maybe of course I'm thinking, yes, of course, when you hear what my patients are facing, you're of course going to want to change the laws, but personalizing this for the people that are making these decisions, so that they really do understand, like, we need more feedback from medical patients in this state. I think the state should be initiating a lot more of that action where they're asking people, how much do you pay for your cannabis? How far do you have to drive? Do you have a problem with availability? Like all of these, and you know, the state seemed open to that. We did talk about that at our last CRO meeting about trying to, I think, you know, get some information. And I know Americans for Safe Access was collecting some information. Politico is trying to do a data collection of some of the issues in different states. But I really feel like it's like the state should be seeking this data. We should be trying to find out what our patients are facing. And like, this is what I think and what I hear from patients, and we all have our own thing, but like, really when you're making these kind of decisions for thousands and thousands of people, there should be data involved. We should really know what people are facing in a more official way. So
and it's not like they don't have this information or they can't aggregate it because they already have it. Patients are making purchases and each one of those things are tracked. What they're buying, when they're buying, how much they're buying it, who's buying it, it's all tracked. So they have this information, and they, I guess, expect small organizations or small businesses to have the resources to do the work for them. Why? How make that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the state does have the Cannabis Research Institute coming, so hopefully we can all collaborate and be a part of that initiative to do an industry study, medical rec, all the studies that need to happen so that the ecosystem can work better without so many blockages. Because if we didn't have so many blockages, I feel like there would be a little more balance, which is the point of cannabis, right? To bring homeostasis, right? So like if we can do that to the industry, we'd be aligned, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And hey,
completely.
Much easier to do that if you had one agency for the one plant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, it's a 3-minute report. Do you want to watch opioids versus cannabis? The strictness, I think it would be helpful for our listeners if we watched it right now. It's 3 minutes. So
Sure.
let's do it.
ABC5 investigates. Illinois has very tight rules for how cannabis can be transported and delivered.
In fact, those rules are stricter than the federal guidelines for opioids, the most abused drug in America. Here's the story from Phil Rogers.
You got those? Do we have more to grab? Yeah.
We're at a distribution center for Cresco Labs in suburban Chicago. And what these workers are loading
3365
is one of the most tightly controlled cargoes in America. The cargo is legal cannabis, at least legal in the eyes of the state of Illinois. But the rules for how it's transported are spelled out in pages of state regulations.
Security is aware of every shipment that goes out, where it's heading, what time they should arrive.
That security actually starts all the way back when the cannabis plants are grown. Each plant receives its own barcoded number. And those numbers follow the plants and their products through processing here at Cresco's suburban facilities, all the way through packaging, transport, and delivery to dispensaries statewide.
Correct. And we refer to as seed to sale.
Illinois law requires cannabis transporters to move their wares in vehicles where the products are locked tight in a separate compartment. Then there's a second set of locked doors outside. The trucks can't be marked, and at least one crew member has to stay in the vehicle at all times.
What is this? This is our tracking software platform.
Cresco's fleet is monitored in real time. Onboard cameras provide a view inside and outside the trucks, and GPS will alert the company if the truck tries to cross state lines.
We know exactly where they're at all times.
But there's a bit of irony here. Remember, in the eyes of the federal government, cannabis is still illegal. But the Illinois guidelines for transporting pot are much stricter than the federal rules for moving much more dangerous drugs.
It was very casual. All of the product would go into my personal vehicle in just a standard Coleman cooler.
Cresco's logistics manager, Joseph Franks, told us he used to work for a major hospital, transporting everything from chemotherapy drugs to prescription painkillers.
Where would it be in the car?
It would be in my back seat.
The DEA's position on moving even the most abused drugs in America, opioids like OxyContin, is that licensees are simply responsible for getting them where they are supposed to go. The federal regs say all applicants and registrants shall provide effective controls and procedures to guard against theft and diversion of controlled substances.
We do have millions and millions of controlled substances that are moved through this system, through the mail, through UPS, through FedEx.
Former DEA agent Jack Titleman now works as a consultant on compliance with drug regulations.
If you decide that your method of distribution is on the back of a bicycle and on a backpack because that fits into that neighborhood and you've never had an issue, then that might be the correct way of making that delivery into that neighborhood.
2811.
That is not the case with marijuana in Illinois.
Illinois is the most heavily regulated state that we operate in.
Heavily regulated and lucrative, with nearly $1.8 billion in sales since it was legalized in Illinois just 2 years ago. Phil Rogers, NBC5 investigates.
Woo! Lucrative, that's right.
Great video. Thank you, Cole.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for asking the question you asked, because I was able to pull it up and show it and clarify. It was good that I clarified that. So,
boom.
Well, hey, I want to thank you all for your time tonight. I love the folks from Chicago Normal even more because a cat just made a cameo. The cats make cameos. The cats, yeah, we get it. We got cats that stumble in and make cameos on our podcast all the time. So, hey, I want to give you all a chance before we part to tell us where we can find you online.
Oh, well, you can find Chicago Normal at Chicago Normal, NORML.org on all social media platforms.
At Chicago Normal.
At Chicago Normal.
Perfect.
And you can find me at moderncompassionatecare.com and also on all social medias. And just wanted, can we do a shout out? And this should really be Felicia as we're doing this. We were talking about education for healthcare providers. Chicago Normal is planning to repeat their amazing 420 health fair. I don't want to take, this is really Felicia's thing, but since we're here talking about this, do you want to plug it, Felicia?
Yeah, so every 420 we do a health fair. We do party just that night, somebody else's thing, but we produce a health fair to providing education. Last year this year, wherever we are. Whatever. 2022, we educated healthcare providers. We did some workshops on specific topics, and then we also offered CME or CEU credits to healthcare professionals if they took our intro to endocannabinoid class taught by Dr. Audrey Tanksley, who is like the charge of the Cook County Board of Physicians or something like that. So she's our teacher. So we offered that as well. We want to kind of make that program an event where the community as well as our healthcare providers can come and learn and get educated. And then also this year we're adding a layer of having legislative discussions like this, talking about specific issues. Joseph, we also will be having a discussion about cannabis and drug interactions. So I'd love to connect with you on that. And we're looking for location. So I'd like to do it at a university to really make it legit, to really pull in the right folks to come and get educated and listen to us talk about the issues and hopefully get some support from the community.
Chicago State University would probably be a good, I've got some connections there, so yeah.
That's what I want.
That's what she's been saying.
Okay.
And Felicia, I'll hit you too about UIC, who I was hitting up about that too. My contact is enjoying her holiday, so I'm hoping next week I'll be back.
We're the crazy ones working.
Well, stuff happens.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
It's funny. Well, yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah. And I sold my dispensary a couple of years ago to actually Cresco. And so, but the best way to reach me is on social media, on LinkedIn, or just Google my full name, Joseph Friedman, medical marijuana or medical cannabis after it. And you'll see a lot of links and including links to contact me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Be in touch.
That's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We are having one other thing. I'm sorry. We are having a lobbying workshop, or we're calling it a legislative lobbying workshop next month on the 14th at Hatch 41. We're going to talk about things like targeting, getting the right targets for your whatever campaign it is that you're working for. So hope to see some folks there.
It's free.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I went to the last one and I learned so much. Like, yeah, finding who to talk to is a big thing, like you say, you know. So, again, I want to thank you all for your time. Thank you for all that you do, and please stay in touch and let me know if you ever want to come back on. You've always got a home here at the Illinois podcast. So,
Thanks, Cole.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Guys.
Happy New Year,
Happy
everyone.
New
And
Year.
thank all of you for the work you do. You guys all warmed my heart today. I love working with you all. Happy New Year. 2023, we're going to kick its butt. So yeah,
It's our year.
seriously.
Awesome way to end it.
Bye,
Hell yeah.
everybody.
For sure.
Cheers.